If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Sunday morning. With us today is General David Petraeus, a four-star general, and also the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. And he sort of has his ear to the ground and knows what the heck is going on. Well, General Petraeus, there's so many things going on. At least there's less wars. There's Venezuela. There's the Ukraine. There's China. Where would you like to begin today?
Well, I guess we could start in our own hemisphere with South America because, of course, the Secretary of War declared yesterday, I think it was, Operation Southern Spear, about how we're going to target illegal drug trafficking that's linked to the Venezuelan authorities, and the outcome of which we are not exactly sure what they're seeking. Again, in an ideal world, it would be the replacement of the Maduro regime, this kleptocratic regime that is tied indeed to illegal narcotics trafficking, although largely cocaine out of Colombia. This is not fentanyl, most of which comes through Mexico. And again, how to bring that about, of course, is the big question. Individual strikes on boats that intelligence, I'm sure, identifies correctly as, again, trafficking in illegal narcotics up into the Caribbean, then either to Europe or perhaps some to the United States. So the question here is, how do you achieve what we think is the objective of the president and of our military operations? And that is, of course, regime replacement in this case, and whether or not these operations will be sufficient to bring that about. And because there's been no discussion yet about whether the operations will be expanded to go after, say, the airfields that are used for some of this, the stockpiles of, again, coca or cocaine that may be at places from which they're launched by boat or by plane or what have you. And again, I think everyone would celebrate, including the vast majority of Venezuelans, if Maduro were to be replaced, although we'd obviously need to see what it would be that would replace him. It's a country with extraordinary potential. It's been run into the ground first by Chavez and then, of course, by Maduro continuing his approach. But let's see what the actual strategy is, if there is a discussion of that with the public as this operation proceeds.
General, I jokingly said that the president of the real president of Venezuela just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and she's accepting it December 12th, I think, in Oslo. And I jokingly said to her, well, maybe if you invited President Trump, maybe he'll hand you the keys to Venezuela back.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
This latest election, there's no question but that Maduro did not win, and she did. But, of course, that was not the outcome that was declared by the government of Venezuela. And seeing if that could be brought about, again, undoubtedly would be very positive for the country, which once again, economically has been driven into the dirt. And then also in terms of geopolitics and for the region itself as well. So there's not a conduit for cocaine coming from Colombia and so on. And also, frankly, that it is no longer an ally or a partner of Russia and China, which it has been as well, and also, of course, of Cuba.
Understood. So we're just going to wait and see what happens in Venezuela and hope for the best. I mean, to have a Venezuela become a free nation again would be wonderful.
It would be extraordinary. And, of course, it's a nation of incredible potential. among the largest energy reserves in the world. We still do have, Chevron still has a deal with Venezuela because, as you probably know, although we are a net exporter of crude oil, John, we have to import some heavy crude. We don't produce enough heavy crude for our refineries. And that's one of the sources of this, as is Canada, occasionally still some from the Middle East. But it would be a very positive development, certainly first and foremost for the people of Venezuela, whose future has been mortgaged by the ruinous economic management of the two leaders, starting with Chavez and now his successor.
I know, and we do buy a lot of heavy oil from Canada, and we do have our differences with Canada right now.
Well, we do have some. I'd like to see those. I was just in Toronto recently. I'd like to see those resolved, frankly. Again, with Canada and also Mexico. I was in Mexico this past week. And again, we need to continue the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. I think the single biggest issue for Mexican business leaders and the government, also, though, frankly, for U.S. business leaders, among these should be continuation of what started as the North American Free Trade Act, NAFTA, was then continued, extended by Trump 1.0 as the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Again, this should be continued as it comes up for review next year. And again, we need to resolve the differences with Canada. There are some legitimate ones to be sure, and certainly those with Mexico as well. Although I think by and large, Mexican leaders, a populist leadership to be sure, and it has been that way now for 7 years, but on the issues that matter most to us, including helping us with the illegal immigration challenges that we had in past years, and then in a variety of other ways economically, we should want to continue this because, again, it's to our advantage and to their advantage to do that, however many minor issues we may have with them, and also with Canada, for example. The dairy issue with Canada is not trivial, but it's trivial compared to the other issues that are encompassed by the largest free trade region in the entire world.
General, President Trump went to China and got their assurance they're going to take care of some of the drugs going in from the Chinese gangs to Mexico. And then we're also conducting a war on the drug lords of Venezuela. Do you see any progress in that?
Well, we'll see what happens here. First of all, that meeting between President Xi and President Trump in Korea was very, very important. Of course, we needed that meeting to get past the challenges that each of us has created for the other as part of competition, to be sure. But when China wielded the card that they have that is very significant, it's essentially their monopolistic, or at least the oligopolistic powers over strategic minerals and rare earths, not to mention magnets used for car manufacturing and a host of other products that they manufacture. That reminded us how dependent we are on them. We're over-dependent, in fact, and we should have for years been pursuing alternative sources of these different commodities that we get from China. The fentanyl issue is a very serious one. Still many, many tens of thousands of Americans dying from that every year, albeit quite reduced from the height of it. And, of course, the source of the chemicals, the precursors, et cetera, by and large is China. Selling to Mexico, though, not to other countries. Again, the other countries, generally, it's cocaine or others. And getting cooperation with Mexico further on this is a big issue, but it starts with China. And it's reassuring to hear China say that they will reduce substantially what it is that they export to Mexico that enables the development of fentanyl and then its transit into the United States in illegal manners. But the U.S.-China relationship is the most important in the world. Again, it was reassuring for the entire world, I think, to see them reach the agreements that at least reduce the tensions for a year or so. So keep in mind, this is more of a truce than a long-term resolution.
Understood.
But hopefully we can get that in the months, in years that go ahead.
Understood. Now, one more big thing. All of a sudden, it's not on the front page. Russia, Ukraine. Can you give us an update on that?
I can. Yeah, it's very difficult for Ukraine right now, not just on the ground, where the Russians are poised for some what really are still modest achievements, but they are gradually grinding out gains on the ground at exorbitant cost. Again, over 1.1 million killed and wounded on the Russian side, over 550,000 of which couldn't return to the front lines, in other words, killed or so seriously wounded. But they're willing to take those casualties for these incremental gains, and there's a couple that are finally going to be achieved after almost a year, Pokrovsk and some others, that could be modestly significant, but also through the air, where Russia has just most recently thrown another massive set of strikes by missiles and drones. That's notwithstanding, I think there is an opportunity that is somewhat unique now, and I was just in Ukraine for my 7th trip since the major invasion of 2022, in that the EU just passed the 19th round of sanctions. The U.S., the president, sanctioned Rosneft and Lukoil. That's very significant. There's a big package in Congress that I'd like to see go forward to the White House that would augment that and complement what the EU is doing. And the EU has a unique opportunity to take the 200 to 250 billion euros worth of frozen reserves in European banks and launder it, if you will, use that as collateral for Euroclear bonds to be given to Ukraine, which is essentially money that they don't have to repay until Russia pays them reparations for all the damage they've done. So it's almost free money because Russia's probably not going to do that. That would be enormous because it would enable Ukraine to dramatically improve their production of drones. And this is becoming increasingly an unmanned systems war at sea, on the ground, in the air. And actually, I think together with other support from the EU and the U.S. could enable them to stop the Russians cold on the ground, and we then help them do better against the threats through the air and complement that with actions that seek to crush the Russian war economy with further sanctions. I mentioned in particular the U.S. package in the Congress, Senator Graham's leading that effort. And then also to go after those more effectively who are enabling the Russian war machine, which is those who are buying the gas and oil, and we're doing more of that. India, for example, is one of these. And then also those who are enabling the war machine because of their providing the components for it, that is principally China. If you do all of this at this moment when Russia is actually more fragile than people realize economically, they're about to run out of their national welfare funds next year, which would be very significant because that's what they're diverting to continue the production of weapon systems and munitions. I think you could actually reach a point where Vladimir Putin would actually recognize that he cannot continue the war. And you could get at least a cessation of hostilities, not a long-term one, but if you then also issue threats to Russia if they resume aggression and promises to Ukraine if that aggression is resumed, perhaps you could make that durable. So that could be very, very significant, I think. And then just to follow on to this very quickly, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in the White House next week, if he could then agree to bring on more oil production to make up for that, which would be cut off from Russia, if you see what I mean. So if others buy less from Russia, you need to buy more from Saudi. Market also. Exactly.
And the price of oil right now. And Venezuela has promised up to 7 million barrels a day to President Trump. And if that 7 million barrels happens, then the price of crude oil maybe comes down from $60 where it is now, maybe down to the low 50s again.
This is entirely possible, although, again, what you want to do for the short term is just keep it where it is.
Yes.
As you reduce what Russia is able to sell on the market, and you do that by replacing it with typically Saudi. Perhaps we might produce a bit more as well, although we respond more to market forces than to central direction from our government, which is different than some others.
General
so if you put
Petraeus,
all of this together,
yes.
I think it would be very positive.
General Petraeus, we're out of time, but we covered Mexico, we covered China, we covered Venezuela, we covered Ukraine and Russia. Let's talk again real soon, and maybe after the Saudi meeting, and let's bring the American people back up to date again.
It would be a pleasure, John, as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.